Well, good evening, folks, and welcome back. Cumberland Outdoorsman out here at my shooting range, and today I'll be covering another old shotgun. I figured since I was on the subject of shotguns with the latest video that I posted covering the 410 gauge, here I've got a break open 16 gauge single shot that belongs to the same owner, and he wanted me to restore the old gun. It was covered in rust from one end to the other, so I took all the rust off and re-blued the barrel and the action here. And like I said, this is a 16 gauge single shot break open. It had a missing bead, so I installed a new bead on the front and also refinished the wood. And this old gun here came with an American black walnut stock and forend, so I wanted to preserve the color of the wood as it is naturally. And it also had the wrong butt pad on here, butt plate, so I installed a recoil pad on here that fit the stock very nicely. The butt plate that came on it was much too small, and I didn't want to cut any wood at all off of this stock, so I found a recoil pad that was slightly oversized and shaved it down to fit the stock. Just about perfect, you know. I mean, it's absolutely perfect fit for this gun. I think this came off of an old 12 gauge New England Firearms shotgun. But anyway, it has the break open side swing lever here, single shot like I said, and in order to shoot the gun you load the shell and you have to cock the hammer back, and then of course you sight down the gun and take your shot. When you ease down on the hammer, that's your safety. The hammer cannot travel any further forward in that position right there. So if you drop the gun, you don't have to worry about the gun going off with the hammer slamming into the primer there. This is a Springfield, and I'm not sure how old this gun is, but I guarantee you it's probably early 1940s, 1930s even. I'm not sure. I don't even know. But anyway, we're going to shoot it at a couple of different ranges. I've got some patterning board targets here that we're going to pattern the shotgun and see how well it does at 25 and then at 35 yards. But just to give you an idea of what the 16 gauge actually is, it's not as popular of a shotgun gauge as the 12 or the 20, which I have here. This is the 12 gauge. And here's a 20 gauge, and this is the 16 gauge here. And most of these older 16 gauge shells had purple holes like this. Here's the lineup. You can see all three different gauges. And just to give you an indication of the diameter here, a lot of people don't own 16 gauges anymore because they had a hard time finding shells for them, but in some areas you can still find them quite regularly. But anyway, there you can see that's the 12, that's the 16, and that's the 20. So it pretty much bridges the gap between the 20 and the 12 gauge. Now most 12 gauge shot shells are loaded with 1 1/8 to 1 1/4 ounce, and maybe even more depending on the loading. And then once you get into the heavier shot shells, you can get 1 5/8, even 2 ounce loads. And of course there's a 3.5 inch Magnum, which I personally don't use, but they can go over 2 ounces a shot, you know, for the really heavy Magnum loads for the 12 gauge. And the 20 gauge, most shells in a 20 gauge either have a 7/8 or a 1 ounce load, and then you can get heavy field loads that are heavier, like 1 1/8 to 1 1/4 ounce. And of course they also make 3-inch Magnum shells that go up to 1 ounce and 5/8 and more in some cases, depending on the manufacturer and the type of shell that you buy. But the 16 gauge is much more limited. You know, it's just not as popular gauge shotgun as the other two. Most of them are 1 1/8 ounce loads. This one here has number 8 shot. This is a field load, so it's a little bit heavier than the average 16 gauge shell, but these are great shells to use for small game, upland game such as quail, pheasant, grouse, dove, any kind of game bird like that, it's just a great gauge for that. And also for waterfowl, you know, if you can find waterfowl loads in a 16 gauge and you've got a favorite old shotgun that's a good shooter, there's nothing wrong with using the 16 gauge for that application. Well, anyway, folks, let me go ahead and get these targets set up and we'll see how well this old gun will pattern. And then I'll leave with some closing thoughts. Well, folks, here I am 25 yards from that target that I set up there. And I'm going to go ahead and get this gun loaded up and see how well it patterns at this range. And we'll see how many pellets I can get into the circle there that I drew. I'm just going to center the bead up with that and hope for the best. So here we go. All right, let's go see what we got. Well, folks, that was a shot at 25 yards, and as you can see, that's a pretty nice even spread at that distance, and that's a little bit more open than a modified choke, I think. I believe that's either improved cylinder or improved cylinder / modified, if you look at the way those pellets spread at that distance. And the shot shell ejected quite well, as you could see, and put a nice dent on the primer there, so the gun's working like it should. But I've got another target set up down here, and this time we're at 35 yards, and we'll see if we can put any pellets at all into the center of that pattern board. So let me get zoomed in on that. Get ready to take another shot here. Here we go. All right. Well, I'm not sure. I held a little bit low on that one, but I think it should be all right. Let me go grab this other board and we'll compare the two, and I'll give you some closing thoughts. Well, folks, here's the target that I just shot at. This was at 35 yards, and it's still pretty well even. You know, there's shot density well enough for any kind of small game or upland game, as you can see by all the pellets there that are very evenly distributed around this circle right here. And there's 4 of them inside the circle, one right at the edge of the black line here, but still that's good enough for quail, grouse, dove, pheasant, you know, depending on the shot size, of course, like I mentioned. Rabbit, small game like rabbit or squirrel. That's a fine hunting gun right there. My first experience with the 16 gauge, I think I was about 15 years old, and my neighbor took both me and my grandpa on a squirrel hunt down the Cumberland River, and he had a Remington 11 16 gauge semi-automatic, and I remember shooting that old gun. That's my first experience with the 16 gauge. And then the last time, my old hunting buddy, he had a Remington model 58 Sportsman, and it was a 16 gauge. Great shooting old gun, really right on the money, had a good pattern, and shot a lot of quail with that gun. At least he did anyway, but I shot a few with it myself. Wished I'd have ended up with that old gun, but things being as they were, you know, someone else ended up with it. But either way, you know, if you've got an old 16 gauge laying around and you want to go on a dove hunt, or if you're quail hunting or small game hunting, rabbit hunter or whatever, there is absolutely nothing wrong as long as you can find the shells. And if you're a reloader, then you pretty well got it licked there, because as long as you keep your holes and you can get the reloading components, you're good to go. So that's about it, folks, for this old 16 gauge. It's going back to its proud owner now, and I'm sure he'll be happy to see it once again. So remember, if you like to go hunting, fishing, camping, shooting, hiking, whatever your outdoor activity happens to be, I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. But also remember this, hit that like button, smash the bell icon, and subscribe. That way you'll know when more videos like this one will be coming your way. So until next time, y'all take good care of yourselves, get out there and enjoy the great outdoors, and God bless. I'll see you.